Hi, and welcome to today's SME Business Podcast. Your host, Mark, will be joining you to interview a founder of an SME business each week, highlighting lessons learned and revealing insights. Listen and learn each week on how to get and stay ahead.
Hey, dear listeners, thank you for tuning in for the next episode of the SME Business Podcast. Today, we are joined by Jonathan's son. Me and Jonathan are also members of Mentors and Mentees. Jonathan is the founder of Nifty. Nifty helps entrepreneurs validate ideas. Um, Jonathan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, I have some questions for you that I would like to ask to help discover more about you and also help our listeners discover what you do and where you are in the journey. Just to give you a bit more background for the listeners, can you tell a bit more about yourself and how you got into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, so my name is Jonathan, and I run Nifty, which is a preotyping studio and preotyping is basically a creative way for aspiring founders to validate their startup ideas using creative manual experiments. Um, the way I got into entrepreneurship was actually more. And I guess it was more of a family influence type of thing. So my dad's an entrepreneur as well. I remember being told a lot of, a lot of positive things about entrepreneurship growing up, and I just kind of gravitate towards that career path. I would always, well, I remember in secondary school, I would always try to sketch out different products on sheets of paper, and sometimes, time to time, when I would go do trips to China, I would try to go to different factories to show my different, really terrible looking product sketches that I would show to different factories, and then you know, those never really got anywhere because later on I found out the hard way that they cost way too much to make in different factories like that. Um, but that was the beginning, and that's kind of how I got started. And I guess I could go a little bit more into my journey if you'd like, or
Yes,
whatever you want to
no, no,
delve into.
yes.
Um, so let's see. The first legitimate business I ran was called Horizon, which back in the U.S. I'm me and um, a few other uni students, we created an app to match U.S. high schoolers to the best fit uni, using creative metrics such as their personality types and what kind of environments they wanted to be in and what kind of activities that they wanted to do on the day to day, along with like their test scores and things like that. So I ran that for about 3.5 years, and although we didn't really achieve the end result that we wanted to, I think I got a chance to learn a lot of things, both about myself and my ability to, uh, I guess, my skills and abilities, in terms of running a startup. And then I think during midway, I think around 2018 or 2019, when I started running mentors and mentees together with the founder Tim. I became that. It was around that time when I became start to become passionate about entrepreneur ecosystem building, bringing bringing communities together to support each other, or finding ways to support founders. And so and that's actually how Mark and I met, um, because it turns out that mentors and mentees was already a very large Facebook community, and there were a lot of people all around the world. And it turns out there was a very significant London chapter, and you were already a part of it, and it was really cool. So so when I took my next trip to London in the summer, I I I wanted to bring everybody together just because nothing of this sort has really been done before. And so yeah, I messaged everybody, and everybody agreed to meet somewhere in Shoreditch, and so we did it, and it was a really good time. Um, s since then, I don't know what happened to the momentum as much, in terms of that, but But I think just the experience of bringing everybody together, really brought me a lot of energy. And so I've
Yeah,
spent a lot of
yeah,
time
yeah,
over the last couple of years
yeah, exactly.
working on it.
Yeah, because it's nice to like meet up with fellow people that value entrepreneurship. Because that was my experience moving here far from the Netherlands myself. That yeah, I thought more people would be interested in entrepreneurship. Um, and then yeah, I struggled to find meetups and such where people were generally interested in it. There was lots of like, like I want to work for a startup, but not necessarily work in a startup or on a startup. So yeah, that's why I liked, and hopefully that will change, as in it will revitalize or come back in a different form, and maybe this whole coronavirus thing is then causing things to become even more virtual, if you will, and it becomes less of a issue like where do you live, and you get more startups that completely are founded completely virtually. Because I think in general there's going to be lots of people with plenty of brilliant ideas, but not necessarily living in the right spot, quote unquote. Um, so yeah, that's one of the things as well that I'm personally working on. Also part of the Institute of Directors. I just wanna like reach out my hand like you're doing, and then support people that have that feeling in their heart that they wanna build something. Um, so yeah, it's cool that we met. Yeah, so yeah, currently with Nifty, you're doing prototyping. You already briefly mentioned it, but can you explain a bit more in detail?
Yeah. So prototyping is a way to validate your ideas um, using creative experiments to get your own data. So the most important thing when aspiring entrepreneurs, start their own businesses is they need to get data to prove whether or not it will be successful at a very early stage, so they don't spend a lot of time and money pursuing an idea that won't that doesn't have any demand in it, right? So, for example, if somebody has an app idea, right? Um, Normally a lot of people's first instinct is to try to call a developer and try to get them to build it, right? Or they would go around doing user research, but they would always include questions in user research such as like, would you download this app, would you pay for this service, right? And both of those approaches are not always the most effective because they are not always an accurate measurement of the consumer behavior. So what with prototyping, for example, what you do is you require people to put in skin in the game and as a part of your experiment to prove whether or not that they will actually pay for your idea, and then how attractive is it. So if you have an app idea and you want people to pay X amount of money per month for a certain service, what you do is for example, you can either make a simple website or a simple video, and then have a link for people to pre-order for a small discount. And then, and what you do before that is you make a hypothesis. So there's a thing called an XYZ hypothesis, which before you run any experiment, you say at least X% of target market will take certain action. You use that hypothesis, and you go ahead and then you run your experiments, your prototyping experiments, to see whether or not you can match up to that, to see whether or not your results are in accordance with your XYZ hypothesis, which is what you deem are like the minimum amount of people that need to sign up and pay for your product or service in order for you to be considered successful. So for me, I'm a very heavy advocate for prototyping, and it's something that really really excites me. I feel like a lot of early stage entrepreneurs, whether they may be students or a little bit older, um, I feel like if everybody learned how to get good at prototyping, there would be much less failure with ideas, and there would be a lot more successful businesses because people are ruling out ideas that they know will not work.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, let's be honest. It's a general yeah challenge with entrepreneurship that people go like, I have a dream, Uh, and then like they stand on a virtual stage and tell the friends they have this brilliant idea and they're gonna build it. But then there's no market validation. Yeah, so it sounds like a good idea to validate if people are actually willing to pay for your idea, whatever that is, whether that's an app or product or a service. Yeah, so makes complete sense. So I was wondering as well, how does it relate to lean startup?
Yeah, preotyping is actually has a lot of similarities to lean startup, but preotyping is actually leaner than lean startup, if that makes sense. So with preotyping, you're generally not supposed to build a product. You're supposed to build like the minimum possible thing that can get people to put that will convince people to put money into your proposed idea, right? Um, so for example, some people would say like with lean startup, go build an MVP. Um, which nowadays I have a slight issue with like, how people define MVPs because if you go to a lot of development agencies, a lot of people will charge you £10,000 or £15,000 for an MVP, a so-called MVP. At
Yes,
that point, you're not really sure if it's an MVP anymore
yes,
because it's 10,000, 15,000 pounds for even what they think is a basic app chock full of like features and everything. So with prototyping, you're generally not supposed to spend very much time and you're generally supposed to get it done very, very quickly. Um, and you do those if you do those things, then if you do those things right, then if you do prototyping right, you should know whether or not like your business idea is going to be successful or not within about a month,
okay,
running 4 or 5 experiments off that one
yes.
idea, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a quick turnaround, and helps you save your money. Because if the idea is not right, then yeah, if you only got the money to spend on one idea, it's better to make sure you're putting the money in the one idea that's actually gonna pay off. Yeah, so makes sense, and especially now, with changing consumer behaviors and budgets, I actually think in a way, behavior is changing where, for instance, the lower and the higher end of the market might see more change, but the middle end of the market, if you will, might be more difficult, um, because there's more, let's say, erosion of middle classes during the with the pandemic crisis. Um, so that's interesting to see as well whether product or service that you're thinking about also still makes sense for a post-pandemic society.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's interesting you mentioned about like how with the erosion of the middle class due to the
Yes.
pandemic, because I truly think that prototyping could really help um, create more self-employed people, successful self-employed people, and then help reverse the erosion of the middle class. Um, something that like that I continually talk about often is that especially in the UK, there's going to be a predicted dip. There's going to be a predicted dip in the economy due to the combined effects of Brexit and COVID, right? So with Brexit, people are going to lose a lot of financial jobs, and so the financial sector of particularly London is not going to be as strong as before. And while something like COVID is going to continue to hammer the hospitality industry, the travel industry particularly. So with a lot of people, out of work, they need to find ways to support themselves, and not everybody is cut out or should be cut out to, get another full-time job for themselves. So with a method like prototyping, I truly believe that that's a method to get a lot more people starting and running more successful businesses, technology or not technology. Um,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
believe that that in order for in order, I think, for the UK economy to thrive, to thrive in this decade, you know, I think we got to do everything we can to contribute and foster the growth of entrepreneurship in this country, in this city. Um, Although I think London has done quite well so far, you know, in terms of the progress they've made over the last 10 years in terms of, you know, building a tech startup ecosystem and an entrepreneurship ecosystem in general.
yes,
There needs to be, I still want to see much more, there still has a lot of work to be done. I still want to see a lot more emphasis and push in terms of, you know, growing entrepreneurship in the city and the country. And I think if we can all work together as entrepreneurs, as ecosystem builders, as supporters, I think that we can we can we can take this country and, you know, help it to be better than it ever was before.
yes, yeah, and that's the thing as well. Like you said, people are now looking like, okay, what can I do on the side if they still have a job, or what can I do if I can't find a job, and um, yeah, and not even like the Tesco's of the world are not even hiring anymore because you literally have pilots working for Tesco. So yeah, it's quite interesting times, and the entrepreneurship, I agree as well. That but the government should be stimulating that way more. Um, Unfortunately, as it's looking right now, taxes wise and policy wise, they actually seem to yeah, do the opposite, if you will. Hopefully, they see the error of their ways, because yeah, like you said, financial services is going away. Um, I think it was like yesterday. I think 1.7 trillion was moved out of the UK. Um, and of course, that's just on the balance, and that's of course not what they're actually generating daily. But yeah, those are not small amounts. And the dependency on financial services also, let's be honest, is yeah, asking for trouble. So yeah, it needs to be more products because in general, the UK economy is a services economy, and I think yeah, it could help if we actually start making products again. But yeah, we also need to discover new entrepreneurs for that. So like the gym sharks of the world. It's great that we have Gymshark, and I'm very happy with that. But that shouldn't be the exception. Um, so yeah, that's one of the things that you're working on and I'm working on my end, to um, on my end specifically, like to work with schools and such to um, help yeah, kids basically discover there's more ways than potentially get rich and famous than be a footballer, or try to get into a private university, like the Cambridge of the world or the Oxfords of the world. Um, so there's a whole new generation of kids that you know feel like there is a third path, that will be helpful. And I'm not saying that that there's like thousands of people with billion-dollar ideas sitting in school rooms in school classes. But yeah, let's be honest. If you start with like we find 10 people a year that's come up with a successful idea and that gets funded, then yeah, we can turn things around. But yeah, we do need to do something with COVID and Brexit, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting you mentioned a lot of things, those things, because I think I do have a lot of ideas in my head actually, with like how do you boost entrepreneurship, how do you improve, how do you make the UK more entrepreneurial? Obviously, not everything can be done by myself because
No.
I'm not a one man show and it might be really really tough. But I do have a few ideas. Like for example, like if we're starting off with schools, like I
Yes.
think a lot of I think the teaching styles and methods are a little bit like archaic, and I think
Yes.
that that a lot more has to be done to encourage kids. I think to be I think learn to not learn as much of like what would not be applicable in the future, and then but instead to like challenge them to, think more critically, right? So for
Yes.
example, like I'm always a fan of a lot less tests and a lot more projects. That's something I believe. Um, and in addition, like there was a school I remember in Austin a while back that I remember seeing, and it was so unique because in that school, and my friend is like, one of the guys that runs it. It's an environment where there's no schedule for the kids. The kids come in every day, and the school looks like a co-working space. They self-pace themselves in their learning, and they have a lot of free time to explore their interests. So, for example, some kids are doing or helping um, business or consulting businesses in terms of reaching Generation Alpha on social
Yes.
media.
Yes. Yeah.
Some of the kids are building iOS apps. Some of the kids are they're just doing all these like big creative things. And I think that from an education side, rather than sticking to, I think, okay, like let's teach to the test, it's more let's try to build critical thinkers that are willing to challenge themselves and the society around them.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, and that was my observation as well. I think a lot of people saying it, so not uniquely mine, but is that critical thinking is something that um yeah, it could use with some more emphasis in the UK curriculum. Um, yeah, like I know that, and that's don't get wrong, that's typically Dutch. But I was very specifically taught to question everything.
yeah,
Maybe a bit too much to be fair. But yeah, that I'm still, yeah, like feeling like, okay, sometimes I'll be like, I can say something and you'd be like, oh, but why don't you question what I'm saying, that kind of thing. Um, because it just, it becomes a more equal kind of thing. If you question what the other person is saying, and whether that makes sense, and or you're just, yeah, going along, that kind of thing. Um, and then, yeah, the schooling, like, yeah, like you said, curriculum is different. For instance, like one of the examples that I have, and this is why, I'm doing stuff with the Institute of Directors, is like if you are born in the wrong neighborhood, quote unquote, and you don't have entrepreneurial examples that come from where you are from, then your mindset might be such that you go like, well, I'm from here, so I can never achieve that kind of thing. And that's just yeah, well, actually there will be kids in there, not even could, there will be kids in there that have some brilliant idea, but yeah, that they don't even pursue it because they feel they don't have a support system and yeah, confidence, whatever, to pursue it. So yeah, with the whole virtual thing is like, like these things could change. Like for instance, like I like got like online summit software and such. So I wanna like start organizing summits. And then for instance, you could be like, bring this like, like CEOs of this massive successful companies, like, and put a summit together, and then have children attend from you'd say charter schools, or whatever you want to call them, and be like, okay, hey, this is an extreme example. This is Tim Cook, and he's gonna like get you pumped up, or like get somebody like Tony Robbins, like, because if it doesn't even have to be live, it can be like recorded talks where you literally get like, like a motivational speaker, and then you get it like a shark from a Shark Tank or something, or Dragon's Den here. Um, and then like have somebody as well, if it's somebody, like a particular school that has like lots of minority background students, like go out of your way, find entrepreneurs, so they can relate to them, because yeah, that's one of the issues as well, like if you go like, oh yeah, we got this motivational speaker, but yeah, and then the school is like mostly non-white, and then you put this white person that went to this private school, and you go like, well, these kids can't relate to that. So yeah, lots have to change in that sense.
Yeah, no, I feel that. And kind of going off of that, I do want to see entrepreneurship taught earlier because I think like a lot of times, I think sometimes when you give a lot of like when you give a lot of like really broad messages to kids, like you can be anything you want to be,
Yes.
it sounds good for like 30 minutes, but then you still don't know what the path you need to take to get
No.
where you need to be
No.
is, right? I think that regardless of what age, like step by step examples are always the best way to communicate to them, right? And I think that like I do want to see entrepreneurship and things like preotyping, lean startup method taught the kids at a younger age using like really creative methods, like things that will keep them engaged rather than just like teaching them like games. Kids love games. Kids
Yes.
love to work together in teams, and kids love competition, which sometimes a lot of instructors don't always get because they want the easiest path out. That's fine if you're trying to earn money as a job being an instructor and you don't really care about the quality of your teaching. But if you're
Yes.
serious about the quality of your teaching, you talk less and you arrange more activities and you let kids kind of discover certain things for themselves, right?
Yes.
And so that's kind of like when we're talking about building up the foundations for entrepreneurship and especially going into inner city types of schools. The biggest thing is I think you teach the biggest thing I think is teaching kids to think for themselves,
Yes.
to like you said, question everything. And I think it's amazing that you were raised to question everything in the Netherlands. I mean, within my family I was raised to question everything as well,
Yeah.
um but my family was unique among other Chinese families because actually in traditional Chinese culture you are actually taught to listen and follow and obey everything
Yes.
rather than question everything.
Yeah.
And so when you're and so especially like when the traditional Chinese definition of a good kid is, you know, you've got to listen and obey your elders. What does that do to your creativity and your ability to question and your ability to challenge? It kills it off
Yes.
because you're raised with all these messages your whole life. You got to listen, you got to obey, you got to follow to the point where when you have autonomy and you have freedom, you have no idea what to do with it.
Yeah. And that's true as well. Yeah. Um, yeah. I didn't see in from that angle. I guess it helped me. But yeah, it is. Like I always like I had it pretty much like lots of clients where I'd be like, yeah, just because I say something to you, like, doesn't make it absolute truth. Um, so, yeah, please call me out if you don't think it makes sense because, yeah, um, I don't hold the truth on everything, that kind of thing. But yeah, the entrepreneurship as well, funny thing as well, where you mentioned, um, it's not just inner city actually. I think is also like, um, if talking about, the great divide, if you will, the north versus the south. Like up north as well, like it shouldn't just be a question like you'd be like, okay, yeah, London has left us behind. With the whole virtual thing, like, redo the high street, like have co-working spaces in the high street that are like heavily subsidized because it's already empty anyway. Have like experimentation labs, have and lots of things can be virtual. So, instead of somebody saying, yeah, I have to travel to London to like go to this meetup with this, like entrepreneur, like do virtual talks. We have mobile data and such. Just imagine, like having, um, I don't know, the guy from Gymshark, Gymshark, Shark Gym, going like, like basically broadcasting him to, these entrepreneurial labs around the UK, where all these kids sitting and they go like, hey, This kid is from the UK, and if he can do it, then I can do it. That kind of thing. Um, that's the whole power, and I think what coronavirus did do for us. Virtual opens new avenues. So yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. Like if you go like instead of be like, okay, we're near the sea. Oh yeah, so just like my daddy, I'm gonna like work in a shipyard. Why not something else? Or maybe like the kid comes up with you know uh, uh, something maritime related, but for instance, like a device to help sailors save themselves or something, like I don't know, like an airbag, if you will. We might joke about it, but there's gonna be kids that have plenty of ideas, but if they're not in environment, then yeah, they're not gonna feel stimulated to actually express themselves. So yeah, the whole virtual thing, I think, yeah, the whole government has to jump on that really to, yeah, use it.
It'll be interesting because it's interesting you mentioned a lot of that because I think first off, like um, online is good for some things, but not for everything. Um, there's a certain element of there's a certain element I think that gets missing online that you can only make up for by meeting people in person, right? Um,
Yes,
to myself, I think although you can start building relationships online, I agree with that, but you
yeah,
cannot really build solid ground foundation for any kind of relationship, whether it may be business or friendship, unless you meet people in person. I think just that invisible magnetic energy of, being able to meet people in person, I think cannot be replaced. That's something that I strongly believe in,
yes,
which I think kind of goes on to the next point, which you
yeah,
mentioned about like, kind of like bringing co-working spaces onto the high street. It's interesting because something I've thought about a lot recently is that what's going to be the future of the city center if you
yes,
have a lot more people working remotely and
yeah,
doing a lot of activities remotely. And when I picture it, I picture the city center as being less of a place where people have to be and more of a place where people want to be.
yes,
So if you imagine the city center being a place where people can get together, can get together and work on different things and do activities that only being in person can, really, really satisfy, you then start to reimagine what are the different elements of a city center, right? So first off, we talk about co-working spaces and
yes,
experimentation labs, right?
yes,
I imagine the future of a co-working space as not just being an open environment with a lot of desks, but also an environment where people can come in and just try and experiment all kinds of
yeah, yeah,
things.
yeah,
An open
exactly, yeah,
environment in a very inexpensive type of aesthetic, right? So I
yes,
see it as less expensive aesthetic, so much more like a garage style kind of like, you know, fairly affordable kind of
yeah.
methodology. And
Neighborhood rec center. That's how I also see it. You go to like a neighborhood rec center. Um, that's it's not fancy. But it's a safe place, which is sometimes also important depending on where you live. But also, yeah, you can meet, and then for instance, it could be like, you're in neighborhoods where not everybody is potentially inclined to think like, entrepreneurship, but if you then end up going there and for instance like you have 10, 15 people that think similarly, then you can bounce off each other. And then if you then combine it with what can be done virtually now, that can be really like empowering. So for instance like like you can do like a Dragon's Den kind of panel where you find, I don't know, like 20 bright young kids in the UK, and then you have them pitch uh, for dragons around the world, and literally, like at the end, like they pick three, and then like they launch the product. Um, so yeah, it's a lot of things can be done in person, and I agree, relationships and that kind of thing. But I think we're underestimating how it can shorten. let's say, from the process from ideation to actually booming, if you will. Because that it's another question that there's no money. The money is there. Um, so I think, the traditional, um, yeah, startup ecosystem can only be enriched or grown by finding, a generation of prepreneurs, if you will, of kids with bright ideas. And like, of course, it might not always work, but I think we're underestimating, yeah, the new generation.
The new generation in particular is very, very technology savvy. I mean, I think the youngest kids, I believe so. Right now, I'm Generation Z, which is about I think 1998 until about 2009, 2010, and then the after that is um what we call Generation Alpha, which is from 2010. So all the kids that are 10 years old and under, and yeah, it is amazing to see like just like how quickly they've been able to pick up a variety, I guess, of digital concepts, right? Even faster than I have been able to, right? Because those are the kids that I think it's sometimes crazy for me to sometimes I walk around as the Sainsbury's and these kids are holding these 2 3-year-old kids are holding iPads in their hand playing Peppa Pig. And yeah, if you've seen those. And I
Yeah,
remember
yeah, I know, I know.
when I was 3 years old, this was around 2001. So
Yeah,
that meant that I was still, if I wanted to use anything digital, I had a boxed computer, and I could only like if I wanted to play games, for example, I had to get on a boxed computer and type in whatever website I wanted, and that was my computer game per se, right?
yes,
And then
yes.
I didn't see the first iPhone came out when I was 9, and the first iPad came out when I was 12.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's a whole different world. Like I think
yeah. Now I
e-
feel old.
exactly. It's okay. It's okay. I mean, as long as you're adapting, because at the end of the day, like, the next generation after that will be even more tech savvy, and the next
Oh
generation
yeah,
after
yeah,
that.
yeah. I'm waiting for the generation that literally, where people will just have a brain implant, and I know, like, Neuralink and such. But it's way too early stages. But I really think we'll get to a point where it will just become normal, quote unquote, and you'll literally end up with like uh, neo situations where you get a brain plug in and be like, okay, you want to learn Spanish, buy the Rosetta Stone course, and by the end of the week, you know what you're doing. I really think we're gonna get there, and I think we're gonna get there quicker than we might think. Um, and of course, there's gonna be, yeah, scrap metal if along the way, that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, it's definitely accelerating. I remember my first mobile phone was a Nokia 6110, I think. No, 6150. Um, and like people are like, "You have a mobile phone?" And then before, because remember that before that, this is a Dutch thing, but they probably had something similar in UK, US as well, was something called Kermit, which is basically was mobile phone, but actually it was like DECT systems, so like cordless phones. So what you had to do, you had to drive to like a fuel station or a McDonald's, and then your phone would work. But yeah, it's quite funny, and I still remember pages, and then I'm gonna stop talking before I show my age even further.
Oh my goodness. No, 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 it's okay. It's okay. I mean, no, my parents would always tell me stories about like how technology was for them. My my uncle had the very first cell phone, mobile phone model ever. So this was around 1977, and
Yeah.
my uncle had one of those like those big mobile phones.
Yes.
Not
Yeah.
even
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I'm
those
talking
ones. Yeah.
before Nokia 6110.
Oh
This
yeah.
was
Yeah.
the
Yeah. Oh
kind of
no,
like
I've seen those as well, but of
yeah,
course I didn't have that personally.
yeah,
But I had a neighbor that was like he had a home office within the building,
yeah,
because there were offices basically that were rented out, and basically He was the head of the calculation center, as it was called, of the Dutch version of BT Telecoms. Um, so yeah, yeah, crazy stories as well. Yeah, he had like multiple pages, like all different models, all mobile phones, and yeah, the one, the one was like built-in battery, um, um, like I don't know, I forgot the brand even. Acoustic coupler modems and whatever. And I've even seen him like work with a PDP-11, like uh, a computer with um,
Oh my goodness, the
I know,
computer
I know, I
tubes.
know, I know. But yeah, that's how I got started. But yeah, going back, like, if you go to now and be like, um, if you explain to a new generation that you had a phone where you could only call with it, they will look at you like, really? But I run my business from my phone, that kind of thing. Um,
Yeah,
and then, like go, let's say 15 years further, and um, probably the next thing will be like, oh, what? You're not using virtual reality to operate your devices? You're still looking at this tiny screen or something like that. Um, it's amazing, really. Yeah, you just have to keep going with the times, to be honest.
yeah. No, it's interesting for sure. And I remember it's interesting you bring up Neuralink because I saw when Elon Musk did the Neuralink with the pigs, right? He had the whole presentation and he was like, all right, this is pig one, he has Neuralink. Here's pig two, and he had Neuralink taken out, and then here's pig three with like Neuralink taken out and then put back in or something like that. And I saw like kind of like the way they put in that Neuralink, and it's like I guess it's fascinating and scary at the same time
Yes,
because if you remember some aspects of that presentation, they put the Neuralink in between the nerves,
yes,
which is a very scary sight because if you mess up,
yes,
you've completely wiped out this person's speech function. So
yeah,
like imagine how many lawsuits you would get trying to like sell Neuralink and oops, I accidentally wiped out his speech function, I wiped out his motor function, and I
yes.
wiped out his ability to recall short-term memories. That's that would be unbelievable. And then like I think the whole process of like putting a chip in and out of your brain, like I think
Oh, no, no, I agree. But I
that's
think what
scary for sure.
this is like completely different example. But was it like with the 100 meters? Basically, there was always the thing like where people were like, okay, you can't run faster than, what was it like, um, 10 seconds or something? And then
Hmm.
if you run any faster, your heart will explode or something, they said. And then, yeah, then somebody, was like, you know what, I'm gonna train. And then the funny part is after that, were like a few runners that basically broke the same record again a few times, dispelling, the whole thing, like, the world's gonna stop if you try to go faster than 10 seconds. Um, so yeah, that's interesting as well. I think the Neuralink, of course, is so early stages, but yeah, they will find other ways to do it, and maybe like even like micro robotics and something where instead of like injection whatever, it finds a suitable spot. I don't know. There's gonna be plenty of people contemplating about this for a day job, if you will, figuring it out like, okay, how can we do this better? But yeah, right now, like it's a lawsuit waiting to happen.
Yeah. No, we'll have to see about that. In terms of like technology innovation, I think sometimes there's always a debate about like, is all progress good progress, right? Like I think, um, I guess, one of the huge debates of, especially this decade is, like how much AI is too much AI, right?
Yes,
I mean, how much data is, how much, how much should a machine know about you before it gets to be too much, right? Because you train AI and like ML algorithms to be like hyper advanced. That's great and all if you can use it for good, but then also like if you train AI and ML algorithms and then authoritarian governments kind of get their hands on it, that's a little bit of a questionable proposition because like I guess an example I can bring up is in China they've started using a lot of surveillance technology in recent years, right? Um so there's so much surveillance everywhere, like in freeway and motorways and in railway stations and things like that, and then everybody has a social credit score attached to that surveillance. So basically, if you're caught like, breaking the law or like, doing naughty things, here and there, your social credit score goes down. And then if it goes down too much, that means you cannot buy train tickets or airplane tickets and like you're kind of placed on the blacklist and you're shamed and things like that. And so it's like, you know, you hand too much technology also in the hands of like, different authoritarian governments or maybe people that don't have your best interest in mind,
Yeah.
how does that end up, right? But at the same time, if you, because of if you're too afraid of like not so nice people, getting their hands on certain technologies so you don't innovate, that's
Yeah.
also stifling the idea of human progress because in the end of the day, like we've for all maybe some of the harm that technology has done for us, it's done us a lot of good. I mean, it's done us so much good.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like, yeah, of course, like the whole social media debate is a whole other ball game as well. Um, where initially it started like it helps you reconnect with people that you don't live close to with or friends and people that moved on after university. Um, yeah, and then now like it's on the other end where it becomes like a dopamine addiction kind of thing. Um, so yeah, fortunately there's also darker sides to every new development pretty much. Um, but yeah, then you can't also then decide to just like stay where you are, if you will, because then you don't move forward as well. Um, so yeah, that's always a difficult balance.
Exactly, exactly. Because I think with new innovation, like there's always a good and bad side to new innovation, but it's like you can never really go back, right? For example, like you got a lot of sometimes I hear stories about a lot of like, really, really old people talking about how life was better the days with only newspapers. I mean,
Oh
that's
yeah,
good and
yeah,
all. I'm
uh,
sure, that in life in certain ways was a lot better with only newspapers. Like that meant that kids played outside with leaves all the time and, and people didn't really hurt their eyes and, and all of that and all of that type of stuff. But if in 2020 we were still only using newspapers and writing letters to all the people that we cared about, imagine how much smaller our network would be.
yes,
Imagine how much less people you could have reached. Um, imagine just like how much less interconnected
yeah,
the world
exactly.
could be.
Like
Yeah.
it's like
So
if you lived in the wrong neighborhood, you didn't have the money, and then it'd be like, okay, well there goes your chances for success already because you don't have the right environment. Well, right now it's like that literally there might be gangs in your neighborhood, if you will, but as long as you can get online, you have some way out and potentially like get yourself out of the situation, and that might not be in a single step. But yeah, at least there's options. You can find out that there's other options than resigning in your fate, if you will. Um, so yeah, but I have to stay hopeful. So yeah, as well, we talk about a small business and such. What do you feel as well that governments could do better to help small businesses grow?
um, I think to understand small businesses better. A lot of times governments are operating out of the assumption of what they think businesses need as opposed to what businesses actually need. I think like I guess take for example if I was like if I was in a governmental authority position and I was tasked figuring out ways to help businesses, you actually got to like go around and ask businesses what they need help for and what they really care about as opposed to like snapping off your finger and be like, oh, this is what I think they need. No, you have to go and ask businesses what they need, what they're struggling with, and then tailor your budget and your programs to, be able to match that, right? And so that's extremely important. That's one. But then there's also the other element of like governments aren't in charge of entrepreneur ecosystems, the entrepreneurs are, right? All the governments, their job is to reduce the amount of bureaucracy possible needed to start a company, and to occasionally help out with like, the funding of, certain programs that will like help grow businesses. All right, that's it. The government's job is not to grow a startup ecosystem. It's the people's job to grow a startup ecosystem, right? So all the help the government can throw out there, I mean, doesn't mean squat if nobody's really willing to, per se, what do you call it? Like, no, if nobody's really willing to, take on the responsibility of, okay, let's put a meetup together, or like, what else? Like, be an active angel investor, go out and actively mentor startups, and, bring people together. And if people aren't willing to take responsibility and do those things, and rather pass it off to some higher authority, nothing gets done. So sure, the government can do some things, and but the real impetus actually lays on us as entrepreneurs. It is our responsibility to be, I think, the change that we want to see in the ecosystem that we're in, rather than pass the blame off to the government, right? If we think that the government's not helping us enough, why don't we figure out a way that, okay, where the government is not doing what they're supposed to do, where maybe the government may have fallen short, and then let's take up the responsibility. Let's do what we can to help out on this end, right? Vice versa, right? I think that's how we encourage entrepreneurship. That's how kind of like we push the envelope. That's how we build out the ecosystem and the environment.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Like, it shouldn't be served up. But yeah, I do feel they can do more, because they go like, a lot of it is like, like we're supporting small businesses, and then literally introducing measures that are the opposite of supporting those businesses. So yeah, that's yeah, and I get it, like that, in general they go like, the bigger the organization, if the organization fails, then it's a massive impact. Um, but then you also have to always think like how many companies that were around, let's say 100 years ago, are still around, and then the number actually becomes much smaller. So yeah, in a way, it is in the government's best interest as well to get small businesses in, and not all of them will grow to a massive business. But yeah, you need revitalization as well to get there, and that can't all be done with just venture capital. Um, I think, especially if you talk about like renewable energy and such, I think the government can do more, and then when it comes to tech, they can be more supportive, um, to create the right, yeah, system. And of course, yeah, the Silicon Roundabout or such, but in Tech City, but I still feel, yeah, more can be done. Um, and like I said, stimulating entrepreneurship as well. That shouldn't be a question of like people getting out of college and such, and then finding out like about entrepreneurship from like an online talk, if you will. They should already come out, even in my opinion, out of high school already with some idea. And let people open a lemonade stand, and sell lemonade.
Yeah. I mean, I think it still boils down to, I think, like the government's job is to remove as much bureaucracy as possible, right? If we're talking about like it's the government's job to make it easier for people to start businesses, right? Kind of try to get rid of as much, like, do what you can to get rid of as much bureaucracy as you can, and then, obviously, like, kind of looking at your budget, and I guess, seeing like who how much money do you have to allocate to entrepreneurs, and then like having actual entrepreneurs running those government programs rather than like a bunch of like train civil servants. I think at the end of the day, like it all boils down to, when we talk about the failure of government programs, it all boils down to them being out of touch with the average person, right? They make programs for who they think they need it, and methods that they think will benefit them, and oftentimes like a lot of that is a lot of times that isn't that doesn't necessarily line up for
No, no,
for
exactly.
what people actually need, right? I mean, you
Yeah.
know, I'm sure Rishi Sunak is doing the best he can. I respect him and I respect his position. But let's be honest, Rishi Sunak ain't no entrepreneur. All right, Rishi Sunak
No,
isn't an entrepreneur, and
no,
he's not a businessman. He doesn't get what entrepreneurs need on a day-to-day basis.
no.
So his job should be to provide resources to certain entrepreneurs and ecosystem builders to let them like find ways to uplift up their community and vice versa, right? Like
Yes, yes.
Rishi Sunak shouldn't wave a wand and be like, all right, here's what I think businesses need, here's future support program X, Y, and Z and whatever. Like he doesn't you can't produce stuff in areas that you don't know about effectively, right? It's exactly
No.
like going to a certain gardening example that I put earlier. Like if I was the chairman of the International Gardening Association, if I came up with laws with different support packages for people that love gardening, that's not going to be helpful because I know nothing about gardening. And
Yes.
so like all the gardeners are going to be like, how does this help me?
Yeah.
It doesn't.
Yeah, no, it's true. And to be fair, like Rishi also said, he said like about not supporting like small business entrepreneurs and directors of it. He was like, I apologize, you are overlooked. But I do support you just like my parents were entrepreneurs. And I'm like thinking like, so you're acknowledging that your parents are entrepreneurs, and yet you're saying that you can't help entrepreneurs. And I'm like thinking like, you just go like that. Well, so basically you're saying that if that happened at the time, your parents wouldn't have been supported, then you might not have been in a position to become a hedge fund manager, which is quite interesting if you think about it, timeline wise. But yeah, it's just yeah interesting. Like and that's the only thing that wanted to add as there is like like the whole public-private school system. I think needs a overhaul. Um, but yeah, that's a personal opinion there. I know that not everybody agrees with that. Um,
Yeah, that's fine.
yeah, that could be a whole editorial in itself. Um, uh, if a budding entrepreneur would come to you, what piece of advice would you give that entrepreneur? Just one piece.
Um, Preotype your ideas, grow your emotional intelligence, and build relationships. I think even if you don't have a lot of money, one of the most important currencies you can build out is your relational currency.
Yes.
Try to build as whatever field that you're interested in, try to build as many high quality relationships as you can in that field. Whether they may be friendships or like maybe strictly professional types of relationships, try to build as many high quality relationships you can um, in the entrepreneurship sector. Try to give more than you take.
Yes.
And yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that I would say. Be understand emotional intelligence and be relational.
Yes. Yeah, and that's what I'm, like I'm trying to do outside of this as well, like I go through my network on LinkedIn and go like, how can I um, connect two folks together so they can both win together, that kind of thing. Um, because it's yeah, you know, in the end that will come back to you. Um, and then the other question I had was that if you had a magic wand, what would you want to happen?
If I had a magic wand, well,
You
I'd
you
like
can
to
only do
end.
one thing with it, so that's the challenge.
I do one thing with it.
Yes, only one thing.
Right. Let's end poverty.
Okay, sounds like a good one. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, that was a good one. Yes. One of the other guests was like, "Oh yeah, give me enough vac uh, um, vaccines for COVID for the whole world." That's a good one as well. It's funny how it all comes back, where people go like, it's like it's greater than me kind of thing response, which is good to see. It means that we're all like, in the end, got our heart in the right place, that kind of thing. So it's good to
exactly,
see.
for sure.
Um, th- Thank you for your time. I took quite a bit of time today, but I think, I think it was interesting for me. I hope it was interesting for yourself as well. And interesting for you as a listener, listening at home, in the car.
Thank you for tuning in this episode. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I look forward to having you tune in again next episode. See you next time.
Motorbike, wherever that might be, surfboard. Any particular specific vehicle that I missed, do let me know. Um, and I'll see you all in the next episode. And again, Jonathan, thank you for your time.
Awesome, man. Let's catch up later after this.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers.